Platinum Group metals have lost their luster, and this has taken the shine off Anglo American Platinum's interim results. The miner has posted an 18% decline in earnings. That's largely due to lower PGM prices, while once-off restructuring costs and inflation also weighed. A dividend of R9.75 has been declared. This is 19% less than the previous period's payout. The results come as Amplats is readying itself for a planned demerger from its parent company, Anglo American. To that end, its focus has been on reducing costs. That's led to job cuts. 3,700 positions have been affected. The miner says 75% of the affected employees had exited the company by June, and the remaining 25% are due to leave in the second half. Commenting on the demerger, CEO Craig Miller has stated that Amplats is working to deliver a responsible and orderly separation from Anglo by the end of 2025. Meanwhile, Anglo American has agreed to sell 2 royalty assets to Taurus Funds Management. These include a De Beers-owned asset related to the Onslow Iron Project in Australia and a gold and copper royalty related to the Caspish project in northern Chile. The transaction carries a price tag of up to $195 million. The move is part of a review of Anglo's assets, which it started in February as the diversified miner plans to divest less profitable assets and focus on expanding its copper output. South32 says the future of its Western Australian Worsley aluminium business is in question. That's due to environmental permit requirements. The situation has led the miner to take a $554 million charge on the business. Off the back of the news, the firm's counter fell over 10%. Sasol has increased its coal exports by 5% in the year to end June. That's thanks to an improvement in freight rail performance and comes despite a 2% dip in coal production due to a reduction in the firm's mining operations. Output from Sasol Secunda operations, where the company produces synthetic fuels and chemicals from coal, was flat at 7 million tons during the period, while revenue from the chemicals business declined 13%, mainly because of lower prices. Sasol will release results on the 20th of August. Mr Price has bagged a higher sales. For the 13 weeks to end June, sales grew 4.6%. That's thanks to recent acquisitions. The fashion and home retailer says it also managed to gain market share for 11 consecutive months, and on a 12-month rolling basis has gained just over 1.1 billion rand in market share. Looking ahead, Mr Price is cautiously optimistic. The group believes South Africa's prospects are improving thanks to favorable election outcomes and no load shedding for over 100 days. But the firm has highlighted that things will remain challenging for consumers in the medium term until key relief measures such as an interest rate cut come into effect. Hammerson plans to sell its 42% stake in luxury shopping centre operator Value Retail. LVMH-backed private equity firm Al Catterton is interested in the holding. The UK property developer says it will receive cash proceeds of £600 million from the sale, and it will use this to reduce its net debt and invest in assets in its core markets. On the international front, a budget airline, Ryanair, reported a 46% fall in after-tax profit for its April-June quarter from the prior year, missing analyst estimates, and warned that fares for its key summer months would be materially lower than last year. Here's more detail in this package report.
Ryanair reported a huge fall in after-tax earnings on Monday. The budget airline said profit was down 46% for the April to June quarter from the previous year at $392 million. It was well below analyst forecasts of around $586 million. CEO Michael O'Leary said average fares per passenger fell 15% in the quarter from a year earlier. He added the airline was forced to engage in more price stimulation than expected. And he further warned fares for its key summer months would be lower than last year. That's not great news for investors, as Ryanair usually makes most of its profit during the July to September quarter. O'Leary said it was too early to forecast profit for the full financial year, which ends on March 31st. Ryanair said it thought the weakness in fares was due to consumers being more frugal and a bit more cautious. The Irish airline has seen its shares tumble over recent months, in large part due to fare weakness.
And Microsoft users have been recovering from a worldwide outage that affected about 8.5 million users. Let's check in with our reporter Darling Lachela for an update on that. Darling.
That's right, Zinati. Many company operations are largely back to normal after Friday's CrowdStrike IT outage across most parts of Europe and worldwide. But experts are warning it may take weeks for businesses to fully recover. And joining us with more is DW correspondent Chibonda Chimbelu. Thanks for your time today, Chibonda. Now let's get straight into it. What do we know about the impact of the IT outage?
Thanks for having me. Well, over the weekend, Microsoft said that the outage caused by IT vendor CrowdStrike affected 8.5 million Windows devices. Now, that is less than 1% of Windows devices worldwide, but these were machines used in many critical services, including banking, transportation services, so airlines, airports and rail operations, and even hospitals. The outage had the biggest impact on international travel. Thousands of flights were canceled on Friday, leaving crew and planes in the wrong cities. And airports, of course, also struggled with checking in systems and security. So dozens of thousands of travelers missed their flights. And here in Germany, international airports in Berlin, Hamburg, and Frankfurt were only able to resume most of their services on Saturday. In some countries, patient medical records couldn't be accessed as a result of the IT outage. And that, of course, was the case for the UK's National Health Service and some health providers in Germany and Austria. Now, experts are saying it could take days or even weeks for businesses and organizations to fully recover. So this is something that policymakers are also watching closely.
Let's talk about that in further detail. How could policymakers then respond to this incident?
We could see policymakers double down on antitrust efforts. The fact that one incident affected businesses and organizations in a wide range of sectors across the world has shown that there is an over-reliance on a few providers. So this is something that will provide policymakers who have been pushing for more competition, so having more players on the market in some tech sectors to make their case. Despite the fact that less than 1% of Windows devices were affected, the impact was felt by millions across the world. Now, this, of course, may be also linked to tech giant Microsoft's market dominance. The US company has, of course, also been increasingly facing antitrust scrutiny, and many believe it gave up its seat as an observer on the board of OpenAI as a result. But this is not just about competition. The reliance on tech also shows it's about security. Over-reliance on a few providers could potentially be putting millions across the world at risk, even when it comes to accessing medical services, as was the case in the UK, Germany, and Austria.
Now, does this mean that big tech will face even more pressure?
Well, a Microsoft spokeswoman tried to push the blame for Friday's outages away, saying it was due to the reach of CrowdStrike. But it is highly unlikely that policymakers will see it that way. Now, that's because of the extent of this incident. EU Justice Commissioner Didier Reynders said that similar approaches are needed as governments and businesses in Europe and the US are relying on the same tools. So we could see policymakers across both sides of the pond collaborating in targeting big tech's influence with regulation. Here in the EU, the Bloc's Digital Markets Act went into force in March this year, and that law aims to create a fairer digital market by preventing big tech from cornering parts of the online market and ensuring they give users more choices. So we could see more of that.
Let's leave it there. Thanks for your time and insights. That was Chibonda Chimbelu from Deutsche Welle. It's back to Zinati now with your markets.